Good day, everybody. It's Andrew here, and welcome back to my channel. We have a huge update from the White House, and this is Jen Psaki's first day back in front of the public giving interviews since she tested positive for COVID-19. Now, in this interview, she's going to talk about COVID-19. She's going to talk about inflation, which, as we know, inflation is completely tied in with the chance of getting stimulus checks and tied in with the chance of getting an increase in Social Security benefits. So, this is a general update from the White House talking about everything from the economy to inflation to COVID 19 and everything in between. Before we play the press conference, guys, I just want to say thank you for supporting my work, as my job here is to be a voice for seniors and be a voice for those who are disabled. And it's truly been a blessing to be here every single day with the community, giving you guys updates and keeping in touch with everybody in the comments. So do me a huge favor. After you listen to what Jen Psaki has to say, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think about COVID-19, about vaccine mandates, about the inflation issues, about supply chain issues, about getting stimulus checks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, guys. This is truly a community, and I truly do appreciate your comments. Now, with that said, this update is a little more broad. It's going to be a general update from the White House. It's not going to just focus on stimulus. It's going to cover all the topics we just mentioned and various other topics as well. So, with that said, thanks for watching. Let's take a look, see what the White House had to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I should have a detailed update video on this tomorrow morning, kind of dissecting and detailing everything the White House said and how all of this could relate to stimulus.
Negative tests, and then on October 31st, I received a positive test, and I put out that information out of an abundance of transparency. I had not seen the president or had close contact for 5 days given the trip, and when I did see him 5 days prior, we wore masks and we were sitting outside. As I noted in my initial statement, and was still the case even after that, I had mild symptoms, primarily fatigue, and I remain incredibly grateful for the vaccine and the impact of the vaccine in keeping me safe and other people in my house safe as well. I also noted in my initial statement that I would be abiding by a 10-day quarantine, which for the math, it started on November 1st, which was the day after I received a positive test. It ended on Wednesday, November 10th, and then yesterday, per White House protocols, I had a negative test, and hence I am here back with all of you today. Andrea, first let me say that, a lot of the talk about inflation, I'm not saying from you, but in general out there, has been, it's become a political cudgel, and it shouldn't be. It's impacting, as you said, millions of Americans, no matter their political party, and that's certainly of concern to the president. I would note that everyone from the Federal Reserve to Wall Street agree with our assessment that inflation is already expected to be substantially decelerate next year. I know you're not talking about that, but that's an important component here. And economists across the board also agree that the president's economic agenda, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that he will sign on Monday, and the Build Back Better bill that we are working to move forward will not add to inflationary pressure and will ease inflationary pressure over the long term. But when we move past the economic jargon, which I realize is what you're asking me, and talk about the real impacts on people's lives, we're really talking about cost to people, right? And you talked about this on Wednesday. So it's cost of childcare, cost of housing, cost of gas, cost of household goods. That's how people are experiencing this on a day-to-day basis. And that is, of course, of concern to the president. Our view is that the real risk here is inaction. And the reason I wanted to do this slide today, I love slides and graphics on my first day back, because we had to have one, but is because if we don't act on Build Back Better, what we're doing is we won't be able to cut childcare costs in 2020. We know that is a huge impact on people's daily lives and American families. We won't be able to make preschool free for many families starting in 2022, saving many families $8,600. We won't be able to get ahead of skyrocketing housing costs. I mean, that's a part of this bill too. Has a major investment in building new housing affordable housing units so that people can move into them and live in them and address the pending housing crisis. And we won't be able to save Americans thousands of dollars by negotiating prescription drug prices. So our view is this makes a strong case. This is a strong case for moving forward with this agenda, because what we're really talking about is cost to American families, how it's impacting them, and that's something that if we don't act now, we won't be able to address these things in the short term either.
Last one, Senator Manchin was critical of sort of inflation this week. Obviously, there's a question of if it'll impact his vote on the Build Back Better issue, and I'm wondering if you've received any assurances from him that it will not. But also, it plays into sort of larger critique that he's had about the Fed having at some point ramped down. He wishes that they had ramped down bond buying and quantitative easing. So I'm wondering if that is a criticism that the White House agrees with, especially as the president's sort of evaluating this position going forward.
I'm just not going to get into critiquing the Federal Reserve from here or their decisions, given they make independent decisions. I would note that, and I'll let Senator Manchin, of course, speak for himself and his support or concerns he may have. What we're focused on is getting this bill passed through the House next week, and we have every intention of working with leadership to get that done. And we will remain at a senior staff level at this point, engage closely with Senator Manchin, answer any questions he has. I will note that the vast majority of outside economists agree that this is not a bill that will add to inflationary pressure. And in fact, over the longer term, it will ease inflationary pressure. And I would note just a couple of people who at times haven't always been positive about our proposals. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers said about Build Back Better, I don't think that's an inflation problem. He said if he was in Congress, he would vote for it. Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi, I don't think the Build Back Better agenda will be inflationary. I think it's designed to lift long-term economic growth by improving productivity. That's public infrastructure, roads, bridges, broadband. That will make us more productive. That should ease inflation. As we know, increased economic productivity and growth eases inflationary pressure. And of course, our favorite, the 17 winners of the Nobel Prize in Economics, who wrote that because this agenda invests in long-term economic capacity and will enhance the ability of more Americans to participate, it will ease longer-term inflationary pressure. I would also note, and then I will keep cooking around here, but that one of the reasons they don't have concerns, as they've said in many of these interviews that I was just pulling out components of, is because it's fully paid for. And the reason it's fully paid for is because we're asking corporations, the wealthiest Americans, to pay more in taxes. That is something. You don't need to be kind of a sleuth here to understand why some Republicans are speaking out against this package. Is it because they're opposed to lowering childcare costs? Is it because they're opposed to making sure that preschool is available for families? Is it because they're opposed to lowering healthcare costs? No, it's because they don't want to raise taxes on corporations. We all know that. Hope people ask them those questions.
Democrats are calling for the president to release barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to bring down costs, and that would be somewhat of an immediate action to mitigate these high gas prices, as opposed to waiting for the BIF money to be implemented to address the long-term supply chain issues or the Build Back Better to be passed. Why has the president not yet done that? Does he plan to do that soon?
I don't have anything to preview for you. I can just reiterate what I conveyed a little bit earlier, is that certainly the cost of gas is on the mind of the president, as it is on the mind of many Americans across the country. And there are several steps we've taken, including pushing the FTC or asking the FTC to look into price gouging. Something we've seen and we have concerns has been an issue over the past few months as the availability and supply of oil has gone up and prices have not come down. Pushing OPEC to release more supply to meet the demand. And certainly there are a range of other domestic options, but I just don't have anything to preview at this point in time.
Can I get your response to this report from the Tax Policy Center that under the Build Back Better plan, most millionaires would get a tax cut? Two-thirds of people making over $1 million would get a cut on average of $16,800, mostly because of SALT. Separately, it finds that 20 to 30% of middle-class households will pay more in taxes. Granted, it's a small amount, between $100 and $230, depending on income levels. But how does the White House frame this reconciliation plan as a tax cut for the middle class paid for by the rich when this analysis is showing the opposite?
It actually doesn't. Just to give a little bit more context of what the report showed, it also showed that the average family with children making $75,000 to $100,000 per year will get an income tax cut of about $2,230. It also showed the average. It showed the average taxpayer with income above $1 million per year will see their income taxes go up by $65,000. 75% of the tax cuts go to families making less than $200,000 per year, with 54 million families making less than $200,000 a year getting a tax cut. What we also don't buy into, which is part of your second part of this, is that any tax that dares touch big corporations, many of whom are making record profits and not paying any taxes at all, is somehow a tax on the middle class. Most economists agree with us. Build Back Better will clearly lower taxes, lower costs, raise wages, and economic growth, increase economic growth for the middle class. The strategy, and just look at the 2017 tax cuts. That was argued at the time that giving tax cuts to big corporations would trickle down to lower income people. It didn't. None of that happened. So we're just not buying into that notion.
But doesn't that not take effect, that cut that you're referencing, until 2023? So I guess what I'm getting at is next year, 2022, expectation is that middle class families will be paying, granted, a little bit more, but still a little bit more if this passes. And then also, they're still dealing with issues like gas prices being high. You guys have talked about the actions you're going to take or are looking at, but these are long-term solutions mostly that you're talking about. So what will be done in the immediate future to address the next year?
Actually, many of them are short-term. But what is true and is not often out there is that a lot of these pandemic relief programs are ending. Right, are ending. So if you look at the spending, I don't really have a graph right now, I'm kind of making a fake one, but if you look at the spending from pandemic relief, that is going to go down because a lot of those programs are ending. So when people are out there, this isn't your question, but it just made me think of it. When people are out there criticizing the influx of money into the economy, that's actually misleading and inaccurate. What we're really talking about here is we're ending those programs. The president supports that. There are programs, to your point, like the child tax credit, that if we don't extend the child tax credit, 40 million Americans will no longer get the benefit of the child tax credit. That's an immediate benefit that would be happening next year. I mentioned before, investing in housing and building lower income or available housing that allows for options for lower income and middle income families. That is something that will have an impact. Cutting childcare costs in half. That's something that will happen next year. Those are all ways that we're working. We are trying to and focused on lowering costs for Americans. That would be a part of this bill.
And then just a quick question on the infrastructure bill, because in Baltimore, the president talked about how it will ease congestion at
Yeah.
ports. But those projects are going to take time. So when do you think that funding will actually have a direct impact on the bottlenecks we're seeing now? And in the meantime, is there anything more the administration can do ahead of the holiday season?
Well, one of the steps we took, there's no question that addressing, being able to ensure that goods are moving around the country more safely, more easily, without congestion, is a big objective of this infrastructure bill the president will sign on Monday, and it will help hopefully address that over the long term. As we know, the supply chain issues are global, and we're seeing them, countries around the world impacted by the global supply chain issues. So, but what he's doing here, and what he's been quite focused on, is really attacking the issue at ports and the congestion at ports, which we know is a big way that goods are coming in and where goods are moved. So we announced, I think it was last week or earlier this week, it's all running together, that within 45 days we'll be launching $240 million in grants to improve ports. And in the weeks and months that follow, billions of dollars of additional money will be flowing to improve our critical port infrastructure. We've also seen big dramatic improvements at a number of these ports where they are quite crowded because the increase in demand and in goods that are moving has increased by about 20%. But because of the steps that have been taken in terms of moving empty containers, in terms of putting in place requirements or consequences for congestion, that has dramatically, we've already seen improvements in that. So the president announced this major ports plan. We're going to get this funding out. He's really focusing on the areas where we have the largest amount of traffic that's coming into the country, which certainly makes sense, and that's a part of what we can do more immediately.
Just a quick follow-up on Dr. Califf. Obviously, so when Senator Manchin released a statement yesterday, he talked about his ties to the pharmaceutical industry and then subsequently the industry's role in the opioid pandemic or epidemic. So I'm wondering if the White House is concerned that this could be a tough vote for Democrats who come from states where the opioid epidemic is severe, such as New Hampshire and Nevada.
Well, I would say that, one, the president has been very clear on his view on the role of the pharmaceutical industry in the opioid epidemic. He has also been an advocate for lowering the cost of prescription drugs by allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug costs, something we know the pharmaceutical industry does not support. So I think the president is hardly in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. I think they would agree with that component. That is true of the vast majority of Democrats out there as well. And what the president the reason he nominated Dr. Califf is because he feels he is qualified, he has the experience, he's ready to take on this job the day he's confirmed, and that's probably the reason why he was supported and passed with overwhelming support of Democrats and Republicans just 5 years ago.